some quick news stories that, I mean, really, they're short and sweet to the point. The first one.
That'll be a first.
Yeah, the first one is that SNL executive producer, creative mastermind behind a lot of things, Lorne Michaels, is leaving his Paramount deal to join over with Universal Films. Basically, he's not going to make any movies over with Paramount, going to Universal, and he's extending his deal with NBC. This is going to extend not only him at SNL, which it would be until the show hits the 50-year mark, but it'll be somewhere in 2025, but also extending his primetime deals with AP, his executive producing the half-hour comedy AP Bio, as well as executive producing all of the late night programming essentially on NBC with both the Tonight Show and Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers over there, as well as one IFC show that I will not mention because Corey hates it. And
you can talk about it all you want. I'm just going to need the shit.
Yeah, well, he also executive produced Portlandia and executive produces the show Documentary Now over at IFC.
What were the films that he's been doing with Paramount?
So I don't know which ones he's done over at Paramount, but Mean Girls, Baby Mama, Wayne's World, Tommy Boy, Three Amigos, there are some of the big ones that he's done.
So pretty much everybody who's come from doing Saturday Night Live, going into movies, he's been the producer on their work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how it started, but I know because I think he executive produced FXX's Man Seeking Woman, but that was sort of through SNL because you look at Fred Armisen, who's the SNL connection to Portlandia.
I try not to.
Well, but still, I know you don't like him, but
I'm just teasing.
And then the director for a lot of the Portlandia episodes, and actually one of the executive producers on there, Jonathan Crystal, actually executive produced Man Seeking Woman. And not so it's basically like as soon as he gets an in with someone, then he's basically like, okay, boom, Broadway Video will help you out if you have an idea for something that is funny. But yeah, so that's really good to see. I mean, basically that someone with the staying power is going to be there for I looked at the SNL side. He's going to be there for until 2025, where we're going to see a 50th anniversary, where hopefully we won't see Kanye West singing to the light stage thing right here in front of his face, because I'm so dumb on the SNL 40th anniversary special. But I digress.
Do you think that means Keenan's going to be there the entire time too?
God, there's part of me that hopes so, but at the same time, I don't, because if he's going to have a Tim Meadows career, I want to see him have the second part of the Tim Meadows career, much like the next little quick hit news story, where the Goldbergs Spinoff is getting picked up 2 series by ABC with Tim Meadows, Bryan Callen, and AJ Michalka set to star. Now, this is interesting because they aired the pilot already. It aired as a special called 1990 something, which featured Tim Meadows and Bryan Callen, who Tim Meadows plays he
becomes the principal of the school right now. He in the Goldberg show, he's still one of the counselors.
The guidance counselor and all that stuff. And then Bryan Callen was the gym teacher. And the interesting one for me is the fact that you're getting AJ Michalka, who plays Lainey Lewis, aka Barry Goldberg's girlfriend. And so it's one of those, with her coming in as a teacher. So that I'm like, that's interesting because, in theory, you could have a Blackish, Grownish thing where you got Dion Cole and Yara Shahidi appearing on both shows, but that they're set in the same time, not in theory possibly 10 years apart and stuff. So it's like, in one part, she's going to have to look 10 years older.
Well, it's funny because that is the thing, is that in theory 10 years apart, but not really, because the Goldbergs is always 1980 something. This is 1990 somethings. They could be 1 year apart, if that, but there's no way to really track. And it depends on how long the Goldbergs themselves actually intend to go. If the Goldbergs go more than 10 seasons, which is effectively 10 years, they should ace themselves out of the 80s, but time is amorphous. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
They've never given a statement as to anything. And obviously we've jumped forward in time and backward in time on that show in the references and stuff that they use.
Yeah.
So you're just along for the ride to enjoy for the laughs. That's the thing that gets me, though, is that we saw essentially the premiere episode of this, the pilot spinoff, and I didn't think it was that great. I wanted it to be better. I liked all the people in it. adding Lainey because she's another established character and more established, I think, than Tim Meadows' character and the coach may give it that extra something. She was very talented on the Goldbergs, but she was also always on there with either Barry or with Erica. Yeah. So,
well, the interesting part here with this is, the spinoff is being written by Mark Firek, Firek, and so this is a redoing of the pilot. So it's taking what that was and probably using the better parts of it, of the 1990 something special.
Do you think they're getting rid of the sister, Tim Meadows' sister, and possibly her kid?
The other, I think so, because there's a quote in here that Adam F. Goldberg, the creator of both shows, and how this is, the Goldbergs is loosely based off of his life. He says that he's wanting to go away from the family aspect and go to the job aspect, more of a workplace comedy and all that. So, I mean, that could be, one of the things is, we're not really focusing in on the kids so much. We're going to focus in on, Glasgow, Coach
focusing
Keller.
On the kids in the school would be something. It could go in more of a, I know this is probably outside of your wheelhouse, ahead of a class thing, or honestly, AP Bio.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, nailing the school atmosphere of both the teachers' aspects and the students' aspects. And to me has been a much superior show than what this was before, and honestly than where the Goldbergs is right now. The Goldbergs is starting to feel a little forced. Like they've done all they can. Erica being away at college. The last episode, I don't remember if Adam was even there. They're starting to, I mean, the kids are starting to age out, which is tough. Do you remember that 70s show when Kelso left and Eric left, and they brought in Seth Meyers' brother Owen to the group, and it became very Fez-centric? And Jackie just like dated her way through the entire group of people.
Like vaguely, because I remember then it was they added him, but then they also added whatever the Star of Reaper in there as well.
I don't remember that. I know that they replaced Eric's sister because unfortunately that actress had a lot of problems and passed away eventually. But it just, the whole thing was very Cousin Oliver from the Brady Bunch. It's just, oh, let's do what we can to bring in the new cute, or to keep things interesting when we've lost some of the long-term characters, especially the focus characters. And to do a spin-off show that isn't about the focus characters, it's tough. It is really tough, because is it just the also-rans? It's rare that you'll get a spin-off show that will be in the same success range as the original show. And I think even rarer is still to have them being at the same time. Like Cheers had a couple of tries at spin-off shows. They did a Fratelli's. I want to say that they did another one, but I don't remember exactly what it was. But Frasier came out after Cheers, so it didn't have to be compared to Cheers at the same time. And it's not like you're watching Cheers and going, well, where the hell's Frasier? Oh yeah, he's over on this other thing. It's like after Cheers, there was just Frasier, and Frasier was a completely different setting, a whole new cast of characters. Every once in a while, they bring in one of the old hats. Other shows that have done this, like Joni Loves Chachi from Happy Days, it's always tough. The Ropers off of Three's Company, but then after Three's Company ended, they did Three's a Crowd with Jack Tripper, and really wasn't any better. I look at this, and they're all, again, great people. They're very enjoyable on the Goldberg show. I've missed Lainey. It would be nice to see Lainey come back to the Goldbergs itself, but doing this is, I guess, the next best thing.
And also the last episode that you're talking about of the Goldbergs was called Flashy Little Flash Dancer, and Adam was
in that one.
Yeah, Adam was in that one, but it was a little bit more focused on Beverly.
It's been more focused on the parents, because the kids, they're getting to their empty nest stage. The kids are all in different things and are going to be disappearing again to schools and stuff. And it's losing some of, I think, the magic of the family. I think in the Goldbergs, the family was very important.
Yeah.
So making this about the school is easier to do, although you have to age out the students every few years. It's just, we'll see. We'll see if the writing is there. And that's what I think the problem was, is in that pilot episode, the writing really wasn't there. It didn't hammer down the same kind of comedy chops that they'd done on the other show. And also, I don't know if the 90s are the same level of nostalgia as the 80s are.
Yeah, I mean, that could honestly be it too, because I mean, where there is for me with that, because I was born in 89, so I grew up in the 90s.
Right.
There is that bit of nostalgia. That's also because, you know, I don't know what it's like to go to the cinema, you know, in 1985 and, you know, and watch a movie and, you know, and just stay in the movie theater for a whole day. And that's because that was when my mom was in high school.
I think it's because the 90s haven't really disappeared yet. Your average alternative station, and alternative stations started coming out in the 90s to the early 2000s. Your average alternative station still plays the same fucking music as they were. Now, there are 80s stations, of course, so all that music still exists too. But you don't hear it in the common, like, modern radio stations in the same way that you still will hear your Nirvana, your Chili Peppers, your Beastie Boys, that stuff that was in the 90s. Like, it should have cycled out. I don't think the 90s ever cycled out. The other thing is that the fashion trends of the 80s were so crazy. Everything about the 80s was just fucking insane. And I believe it was probably because of all the cocaine usage, because we were just so rich and broke because of cocaine. But the 80s were, like, creatively, just like, movies were huge spectacles still. And I don't mean blockbusters, but I mean that there was just something new about them. And again, like, in that mid 80s time, you had your Ghostbusters, you had your ET, you had your Back to the Futures and all these things. And it was like the heyday for Spielberg, and Lucas wasn't the devil yet. And all of these things that really stood out. And I felt like the 90s was when we were seeing sequelitis to a heavy degree. That's when we got the third Terminator, which just, you're like, Terminator 2, sure, great. But Terminator 3, no. And anything past that, really, with Terminator has been a lot of nope.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's when we lost our love for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so what did we get? We got hip hop, but it wasn't even as cool as, like, the rap of the 80s battles and stuff. It just, I'm not saying it went to shit, but it just became a far less interesting field. And again, doesn't feel so far away from now. As weird as it is to say that we're 18 years into the 2000s, so it's been 19 years since the 90s even were a thing. You always kind of, that first 10 years of the 2000s, you just forget about, and you're like, oh yeah, 90s were only 10 years ago. No.
Well, but it's like I think even then, though, it's because even in the, like, because we probably should start getting that nostalgia of the 90s, because of the fact that, like you said, there is a decade in between, much like in the 2000s. Well, no, because I mean, actually, I take that back, because, you know, you look at in the 2000s, you know, in the early aughts, as it's called, we had that 70s show. And what did that 70s show have in there? It had two generations in between it. It had
we also had that 80s show.
But that only lasted one season.
Yeah, because it was bad. It was a terrible, terrible show.
Yeah. So, I mean, it didn't have, like part of me thinks that.
But we have Fresh Off the Boat, which has been doing 90s. We had that show a few years back, I think, when we started doing shows together, the one on VH1 where the woman's relationship broke up and she knocked herself out in the elevator and woke up back in time in the 90s and fucked up every relationship over 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I never dated you. Well, I'm going to bang you. Oops. Well, that was stupid. That just ruined everything and made my friend mad at me. All right, so I'm going to go bang this other guy. Oops, that just ruined everything and made my friend mad at me again. Like, first of all, your friend's kind of a bitch. And but just in general, like, the fashion of that, it made you like, oh yeah, this fashion was really cool. Like, I still fucking wear flannel shirts all the time. That it was a 90s thing, but it wasn't really a 90s thing. It's just, that's just what shit people wear.
Yeah.
Doc Martens, just shit people wear. There was nothing extraordinary about it. It may have been like we did it a little too much, but nothing really stood out. The biggest thing of the 90s was probably like The Real World.
Yeah.
It was the first decade of reality TV as we perceive it today.
Well, and I would even say with the 90s that it was a lot of it was the hair, because I mean you're describing that. Immediately I go to Boy Meets World, and it's like you look at like it was Sean's hair, how it was all it was always long and similar to how your hair is now when it's not pulled back.
Oh yeah, like the creepy factor that I did on the weekend.
Yeah,
like Bob from Twin Peaks. No, that's I will give you the best description of hair in the 90s. Every shitty wig that they give Arrow to wear in that show is like every bad 90s haircut. That is what he looks like. It's like, oh fuck, they put another wig on Oliver. It's so awful. Yet they all must be from the Boy Meets World throw-off cast.
Yeah. Or but one of my favorite episodes from rewatching Boy Meets World when it's on reruns like wherever is the episode where Eric's on Singled Out, and they have Chris Hardwick, they do before rehab and at midnight Chris Hardwick, where he's like, hey, nice hair at the end. Like it's like such a bullshit little line, but yet it works.
Yeah.
And stuff. That was a quick story that wasn't quick. But there is a segue here, and that is that a comic book that is set in the 80s but came out in the 2000s, Deadly Class, written by Rick Remender and drawn by Wes Craig, is set to come to Syfy. They ordered a pilot of the show, and the other big part here is the Russo brothers are set to be on board as well.
Didn't it say that they've committed to 10 episodes already? Yeah, that's what I think the story was, because I thought we talked about this, and that's why I didn't put the story into the doc, was I thought we talked about this being a possibility before, and I thought we even talked about the Russos being involved in it, but this is the clarification of, oh yeah, we've done the pilot and we've decided we're going to go ahead with it, so it's going to actually land as a series. Which if you're Syfy, I mean, how hard are your nipples if you get the Russo brothers to do a show for you?
Yeah,
right now
the Russo brothers are executive producing alongside Rick Remender, who is Miles Orion Feldsatz. They're both adapting the series, and then they're both executive producing alongside the Russo brothers and Mike LaRocca. Now, this is the one part where I get, because, the Russos are really busy, but it seems like, okay, if you could have, they don't have the Russos directing the pilot, and not to take anything away from Lee Talland Krieger, but it's like you see that title of, oh, the Russos are attached onto here, but they're not directing. You sort of go, wait, what?
Didn't they direct that episode of Community where they did the elevator scene that was straight out of Captain America 2?
Yeah.
They were already making it big, and then they came back and still did that. I thought that was terrific. So there's a chance. There's a chance that if they've got the time, which I don't imagine that they'll have for quite a while, they could come in and do something themselves if they're so inclined to. Because they, just from that moment, just from the fact that they got their start in things like Community, they seem like cool guys. But there's the potential. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what Deadly Class is?
Well, so Deadly Class is one that I didn't really get into, so I don't know a lot about it. But what I will say real quick before, because I think you know a little bit more about it than I do.
Not really. Yeah.
But it stars. It'll star Benedict Wong, who played Wong in Doctor Strange. He'll star alongside Benjamin Wadsworth, Lana Condor, Maria Gabriela de Faria.
Did you say Lama Condor?
Lana Condor.
Oh, okay. It was. Yeah. It's still a cool name. Lana Condor is a badass name, actually. Lama Condor is just kind of funny and awesome. Yeah.
Lana Condor. Do you know who she is?
Nope.
Did you see the last X-Men movie, with the 80s X-Men, with Jubilee?
I've tried to stab my eyes out from it, so yeah.
She plays Jubilee.
Jubilee?
Yep.
Okay, so to step back for a second, I have not enjoyed the last several X-Men movies, but there was a cut scene from the movie where they had Cyclops, Jean Grey, Jubilee, and the young Nightcrawler hanging out at the mall, and that scene was terrific. And that scene was what I would have really loved to see more of in the movie. And the fact that they made that shows that somebody thought some cool shit up and went so far as to shoot it and everything. And I don't know whose hand decided, like, no, let's get rid of that shit and do all this other dumb fucking crap with with everything else. But that scene itself was like so 100% what I'd love to see from any X-Men movie going forward. Because it was just so much fun, and it reminded me of reading the X-Men in the 80s, and they did a couple issues. They did specifically the issue where Jubilee was introduced in Uncanny X-Men, which was all about the women characters when they were all hiding in Australia, and most of the people thought they were dead, hanging out at the mall. I would love to see that kind of stuff, like the X-Men playing baseball at the mansion like they always used to do. They always had ball games every year. That kind of stuff is what I loved in the X-Men, and the characterization, which just seems to be missing from the films for me. Because the films treat them all interchangeably. They don't care whose powers belong to who or who acts like what or why Mystique's there 1,000 times over when she shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I know that star power is important, but man, like it was just this whiff of what we could have had and missed.
Oh, definitely.
And what I think Deadpool has excelled at so far, getting to be silly and fun, everything. It's a very different character, and it's not going to be the same kind of stories as what X-Men films should be. But it was still like, God damn it, that was so good. So for her part in that, I appreciate her.
Yeah. So that's where I said, do you know who she is? Because here, there's a couple other ones here. Luke Tenney, Liam James, who you will know as young Sean Spencer from Psych.
Was he the one that was in
the last other one I know of that he was in was 2012? That disaster porn movie.
Yeah, there were two young Sean Spencers.
Yeah, he's the one from the way back. That's the one you're referring to.
Okay,
the Steve Carell movie. Yeah, and then Michael Duvall. But yeah, Deadly Class. Honestly, it's an Image comic book. So that's another cool thing is we're getting more, like we're seeing the TV companies, and the production companies diving more into Image comics instead of just what's Marvel and DC got for us. It's it's like, oh hey, there's other comic book publishers out there. Basically, it's set in the 80s, follows a homeless teen being recruited into an elite private school where every crime family in the world sends their kids. He must survive a ruthless curriculum and social cliques while trying to maintain his moral code.
It's a little bit X-Men, it's a little bit Wanted, and a little bit Kingsman. So it's two Mark Miller things, which were all Mark Miller stuff is ripped off from other comics anyways, and it's very X-Men-ish as well because of it's the whole class aspect of it. But I read the first issue. I remember seeing it. It was just at the time that I was like hitting my point of stepping away from comics, both because of financial reasons and just because there was a lot of stuff going on in comics that was just kind of underwhelming to me. And I'm not saying that this book was that, but I was just kind of had my fill and I needed to take a break for a few years, which I still haven't gotten past, but it's more the financial thing, I think, at this point.
Yeah. And there's, for those of you guys who want to read the source material before it comes out, there are 5 volumes from Image Comics. There have been 30 issues, which I'm finding a little weird that the Deadly Class Volume 5 here, this is according to Wikipedia, stops at issue 26. So I'm like, wait a minute, there is a series of Volume 6 trade paperback. It came out in December of this past year. But yeah, I mean, definitely check that out. It sounds great. So on the other side, on the DC Comics side, hot off the heels of that Ready Player One, which, did you hear that that's a thing, a movie, based on, a bunch of Steven Spielberg movies directed by Steven Spielberg? You heard that, right?
I heard that he tried not to make it about Steven Spielberg as much, and then people were like, yeah, that would work if you weren't Steven fucking Spielberg. Maybe you should have sat out some shit in the 80s if you're gonna be that way. Didn't leave a lot of room for other ones, Dick. We kind of have to put your shit in here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people are gonna be really confused. Like, wow, is this an alternate universe world where Howard the Duck was a hit? And
well, it's also funny because of the fact that I believe it was for rights issues. They changed in the big final battle. They changed what would have been the Japanese Spider-Man's mech Leopard into the Iron Giant.
Right.
So it's like you could have done any other giant, thing, made it Optimus Prime or anything like that you possibly could have gotten, the rights to. But instead, you're like, let's do this one.
Well, let's do that one. And I'm going to speak on behalf of people who have seen The Iron Giant and love it. We're not going to get an Iron Giant 2.
No.
Face facts, Iron Giant ends pretty much like, that's it. It's a one and done. But it's so wonderful.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying it's not.
And so beloved. And I know not the biggest hit in the world, although I think it's found much more of a following going forward. Mm-hmm. Man, if that's the only chance we ever get to see the Iron Giant on the big screen again, then thank you for doing it.
No, yeah. I'm not knocking that at all. I'm just saying, hey, that's, one of the biggest things in there. But the big thing with this is the article points out, that hot off the heels of Ready Player One, Steven Spielberg is diving into the DC universe proper with Blackhawk. This will be a film. So far, with reading through this article, I haven't seen any of the words to make me shudder, and that would be them trying to link this to the DCEU. I'm just thinking, okay, here, I think would be pretty hard with how this is, this is Blackhawk is a wartime adventure series.
Yeah, not to confuse anybody, Blackhawk was not the winged co-pilot friend of the first black superhero, Black Lightning, over in the DC universe. Blackhawks were a team of fighter pilots in the World War II era comics of DC around the same time as we were having Sergeant Fury. No, not Fury. Sorry, that's Marvel. Sergeant Rock at DC. World War II Enemy Ace, I think. There were some other ones. The losers, the original losers that the Vertigo comic that became a movie later on was sort of based off of the same ideas, but there were a few other ones. But yeah, so a lot of war comics in that era, of course, because there was a lot of wars, and the Blackhawks were part of that. Now, one of the characters, Lady Blackhawk, who's introduced later on in the series, she actually continued on into the modern continuity and became the pilot for the Birds of Prey series. I want to say when Gail Simone was writing it, may have been when Chuck Dixon was on there, but I believe that she was a big part of it when Gail was doing it. Was a fantastic character, just fun, could drink anybody under the table, and wasn't as much in the superheroing stuff, but was just a great voice to add to that group. So not a lot of interactions with DC superheroes that we know of.
Yeah.
So you're right. I don't know that this is going to be we're going to do this and then it's going to lead right into the Black Adam movie finally that's been talked about for years.
But at the same time, I look at it and I go, this is something that could, I'm using air quotes around there, be tied in, but in the looser sense, more in the Arrowverse sense, where if you look at, whenever anyone in the Arrowverse shows needs to go to an airfield, what is it always? Ferris Air. And
right.
It's these little Easter eggy things that they could put in there. That
we could easily tie Wonder Woman into this because we know that she's around at that time since she gets established in World War I. That's something that they could do in post, like, because we know that our next movie is supposed to be in the 80s, not the 90s.
And that's mainly because she had some bad costumes in the 90s.
But oh yeah, she did. Wow. She had some bad costumes in the 70s though, and
yeah,
completely. Kung Fu Wonder Woman was a weird phase of that character. So there's possibilities, but I don't know that that's something that Spielberg's like, I want to jump in it. Like, we know Scorsese's talking about doing a Joker movie, but his Joker movie is meant to be separate from all of the DC shared universe continuity, and I expect that this would be the same thing. It sounds like it's something he could have come up with on his own and just done with anything, but he was a fan of the property and has been a fan of the property for a long time.
Well, in the article here, it also says, he mentions the fact that it's Warner Brothers that did it. Spielberg noted, this is from the article, Spielberg noted, it was wonderful working with the team at Warner Brothers to bring Ready Player One to the screen. They bring a blend of passion and professionalism to everything they do and have a tremendous history in this genre. I'm excited to reunite with them on Blackhawk. So that honestly tells me, it's, I'm not taking away that it couldn't be that he was a fan of Blackhawk, growing up, but that the people that he was working with, he really enjoyed, seeing them and stuff.
Well, yeah, he just explored the sort of comic book nerdity in Ready Player One. Two, he's done Indiana Jones and is working on a fifth one currently. Indiana Jones is very era linked to this kind of storytelling. It makes sense in all ways. If you're going to pick a DC property, this is a good property for him to come into, especially if it's not hugely tied to everything else, so he doesn't have to work out like, oh, how do we lead this into the next DC film and give a shared universe thing, and when Darkseid's finger kind of come reaching through the fucking screen at them. And there's still a lot of fun here, but it takes the onus off of him to try to create a new property. It's going to give that added kick of there is people out there who already understand who these characters are. So it does have, I'll say probably a limited at this point in time because it hasn't been published in so long, but an existing fan base. So he doesn't have to like pretend, because they could have done something like Sky Captain in the World Tomorrow, which is very neat, but didn't catch on with the audience. It might have been too ahead of its time. But if anything, it's probably going to be closer to like Speed Racer.
Yeah.
Which is Speed Racer was a property that hadn't been around for years. There was certainly a huge amount of old fans who were nostalgic for the thing and had seen reruns and stuff when they played on Cartoon Network. But Speed Racer also didn't do very well. And I think it's probably, after The Matrix, one of the Wachowskis' best films. Maybe their best films after the original Matrix. Just didn't catch the audience at that point. But I think, again, we look at it in hindsight and we're like, oh, that's actually pretty solid.
Yeah.
Because it's true to the characters. It's a fun movie. It's just visually, it was unusual, and I don't know that the audience knew how to react to it at that point.
I think
this is good. Yeah. If DC has a lot of properties that they should get out there, that they could have fun with, and if they find the right people who have a genuine interest towards those things, and I mean a real interest towards what the property is, not just like, oh, I want to shoot a movie about people who fly, so I'm going to use Hawkman, and I'm going to get rid of all the Thanagar stuff, which I've kind of done in Hawkman sometimes too. And I'm going to get rid of all the Carter Hall and timeless Shara Carter stuff, which they've kind of done sometimes too. And I'm just going to do this thing where they've all got hawk wings, but instead they all come up from the ocean, and like people would be pissed because it's not Hawkman.
Yeah.
In this case, it sounds like this is Spielberg saying, hey, this is a movie that I want to do, and I'm kind of prone to doing well. And it's a property that I actually like and I'm familiar with and know and would like to do these actual characters. That could work out great. If DC can land other stuff like that, if they can do a Sergeant Rock war movie, if they can do things that aren't all tied into the overarching connected universe, because not all that stuff should go together or should work together, just like they can do Vertigo movies and stuff and not have them all have to tie into this stuff. They should absolutely do it. I think that's terrific.
The last bit of news is that Paramount is teaming with F. Gary Gray to turn Mask into a film franchise. Now, before we get started,
Rocky Dennis story, finally, it's the trilogy I've always wanted. Cher's not dead yet. She can come out of retirement, come back, play the same person. We can get Eric Stoltz, and that's what we're talking about, right? Mask, the guy with the lion face.
I was going to do the joke of the Jim Carrey movie.
No, nobody wants to do that joke because that already happened.
Yeah.
And it was terrible.
Well, yeah,
Son of Mask was,
yeah, but that was also mainly because that was Jamie Kennedy. Yeah.
I think Jamie Kennedy can be good in things sometimes before. I don't know. Isn't he in the new Tremors? I feel like he's been like hanging out with Michael Gross in the Tremors movies.
I think so. But I mean, I'm going to say something that might irritate people, and I'm not going to do it because I was just going to compare Tremors to Sharknado, which I do not like Sharknado. I do not get the hype over Sharknado.
I don't get the hype over Sharknado other than the fact that I think it was it was a surprise when the first one happened. Like, oh, this is campy, but in the right ways.
Yeah,
and they got the campiest actors in the right ways, and they all knew what it was, and they didn't try to make it something else.
You mean the campiest actors, aka the actors from a lot of teen comedy movies from the late 80s and early 2000s?
Well, we got 90210 with the insert, but yeah, it
and Tara Reid, who hadn't been in anything in a while.
They did Sharknado, and they didn't try to make it serious.
Yeah,
they went full on into it, like what Bruce Campbell was doing with the Army of Darkness stuff at that point, and that gave it something that the other sci-fi movies weren't doing, which is just, we know this is stupid, so let's just have a great old fucking time with it. And they did, and that's why it was okay. I don't know that it earned 5 movies, but probably Tremors hasn't either. But you keep going back for the nostalgia of it. It's fine. The first Tremors was great. Yeah. The ones after that have been progressively not as great, but there's still a chance he can come back. Plus, Kevin Bacon is actually supposed to be doing a Tremors series. He'll be returning to the role. It's too bad Fred Ward's not around.
To get back to the original article that we were talking about here, the MASC stands for Mobile Armored Strike Command.
Command with a K.
Yes.
Always the right way to go when you decide you're gonna do your anagram or whatever, and you're like, yeah, it's gonna say this. Well, that doesn't work at all. Yeah, well, we don't care.
But this is based off of the 80s Kenner action figures and the animated series, where it was a task force led by Matt Tracker, whose goal is to take out the criminal organization Venom, all in upper, cap lock letters. The film will be produced by Hasbro and Gray, and they're just, they're plugging away, getting a writer and all that. And it mentioned here, because we talked about this before, of like you didn't recognize F. Gary Gray, only saying because the article says that, he was in the, he directed The Fate of the Furious and Straight Outta Compton, and he'll be doing the Men in Black reboot that will star Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson. And it wasn't until I pointed out his other films. He hasn't done a lot, but he's been, started out in 95 with feature films, where he directed the first Friday movie. And
the first Friday movie is pretty good. I've seen the sequels a lot more because they played them in cable a lot in the break room when I was working retail. But obviously the first one with Chris Tucker is very good. And you said he did the Italian Job remake, which is one of those movies that I know is not good, but I love it and I rewatch it whenever it's on. I can't not watch it. It's the only Mark Wahlberg movie that I allow myself, I think. And I'm so in love with it. I don't know why.
And also let's not forget that same year he did the movie A Man Apart, the 2003 American vigilante action film starring Vin Diesel and Lorenz Tate. I just recognize that movie because that was one of those I think my sister was really into. Like, she was into a lot of those, like those types of movies, and I'm like, all right, cool.
Vin Diesel's emotional side.
Yeah.
Which I can't make fun of because his emotional side is part of what makes me love Iron Giant so much.
Yeah. And then also, of course, Be Cool, which was, as we talked about in the pre-show, one of The Rock's big breakout roles outside of, hey, I'm going to do an action movie.
Yeah, The Rock playing something that was against type.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Be Cool. I'm a very big fan of Get Shorty. Be Cool was the sequel, but I don't know how much Elmore Leonard was actually involved in that one. And a lot of people say that it's not as good, but The Rock is supposedly very funny in his part in it. Back to the MASC show, because you're not familiar with it, because again, this is the 80s, and you were born in 89. So, like we were talking about earlier with what set the 80s apart, in the 80s, man, shows about cool vehicles were huge. And that's going back to the 70s too. You have your Knight Rider, which is a talking car. You have your Dukes of Hazzard, which is the show about a racist car. And you have I'm kidding, but not really. we didn't know. We didn't understand. We didn't know the generally. We didn't get it. We were just kids. We just thought the car was cool. Oh, the doors are welded shut, so you have to get in through the windows. How awesome, for no reason at all. It's like, really? Because opening doors works fine. that doesn't make it cooler. It was just the jumping across the creek all the time that made it cool.
Exactly.
Duke.
Yeah. Exactly. Because that's I tell you right now, dude. I tried that, but again, being a bigger kid, I so tried to do that all the time because Dukes of Hazzard were always on repeat.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like I would try to get in there, and Mom and Grandma were just like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm trying to be like the Duke boys. Leave me alone." And I know in the back of her head, like, "But you're fat." You know, it wasn't like in a heartful way. It was like, you know, you're gonna get stuck, and then I'm gonna have to help you, and that's not gonna be possible because you outweigh me, sort of thing. I never got stuck though.
But yeah, in the 80s, we also got the DeLorean in Back to the Future. We had the A-Team van. We had a lot of cool vehicle stuff. So Mask was about a team of guys that they wore these helmets, and the helmets gave them certain abilities, but then they also drove these vehicles, and the vehicles would transform. And I'm using transform very, very loosely because Matt Tracker's car was like a Trans Am looking thing that it had the suicide doors that would pop up, but then because they would pop up, suddenly it could fly. And it made no sense as far as physics. And of course, he's flying around with the doors wide open. So the bad guys, who I believe were Venom in the show, could shoot at him. There was nothing protecting him at all. Random pigeon could have taken that motherfucker down as long as it was a face shot, because in the face, he's wearing the helmet. But that's all it was. People wearing elaborate helmets that gave them some sort of ability, but it seemed like all of that shit really just came down to we're all driving these weird, cool vehicles. And then Tracker had a son that would ride around in the scooter, and the scooter would turn into a robot, or the robot would turn into the scooter. So it was like the same bullshit of like, I'm your fucking nanny, and I'm annoying as shit. It's your Orko / Snarf crap. Yeah. But I'll turn into a scooter and you can sit on my butt. And weird. But that's what the fucking show, all it was.
Yeah.
Vehicles against vehicles, which is what G.I. Joe was, except G.I. Joe had actual characters that you could recognize and do shit. And honestly, part of the Hasbro group that they're supposed to be they were trying to make a shared universe between Transformers, G.I. Joe, Mask, I think Visionaries, which is even worse. We'll get into Visionaries someday. And maybe a couple other properties. I want to say Pound Puppies, but not really. But I do. Mask is it was beloved because as far as the cartoons that you came home after school and saw every day, the quality was better. I mean, it was always like you'd come home and you had to sit through the Filmation Ghostbusters cartoon, which was not based off of the movies. It was based off the old Ghostbusters movie from like the black and white phase, where they had a gorilla that hung out with them in this old jalopy thing. It was so awful. All the Filmation stuff was bad. You have to sit through that. You'd have to sit through GoBots, and you wouldn't want to see GoBots. You want to see Transformers, but Transformers weren't on until like 5:30. GoBots were on at 3:30 when you got home, so you have to sit through the fucking GoBots. GoBots were terrible. The toys are terrible. The cartoon was awful. The robots blinked their eyes. They animated robots blinking their eyes. Someone decided this and then went through the hard work process of hand-drawn animation to make the robots in GoBots cartoons blink their fucking eyes. That does not make any sense. Even in the 80s, I was just like, I'm 10 and you're an asshole. All right? That's what I'm telling you, TV. You're an asshole for doing this. I should rip that fucking antenna off of you, which I did to beat my friend with it. Anyway, Mask, as far as quality, was a step up from that. It wasn't as cool as a Thundercats Silverhawks, which, looking back, those had some problems too. That Robot Bears episode, man. But it was pretty good and a much nicer thing to get to watch than some of those other lower rate programs. But it was dumb. It was even as a kid, it's like, sure. I mean, flying car, yeah, all day. Dig me a flying car. But maybe not this flying car.
Yeah.
You know? And you're just a guy in a jumpsuit and a big helmet. I don't really feel like I'm getting much from the superheroics out of it. But it could be cool. I mean, updating it could be a lot more fun. And this would be one of those things where they could have used the bullshit hypersuits that they used in the first G.I. Joe movie that made no sense in G.I. Joe. It's like, hey, we're a couple military trained guys, and we're going to put on these fucking suits that are going to make us like really fast and bulletproof and run around and look like we're moving the same way as Transformers did, because nobody's sick of that yet, right? We were sick of it before it came out. And Marlon Wayans. Why?
So Dave
is work.
Yeah. So Dave Nelson is asking the very important question.
Tasteful Dave Nelson.
Yes, Tasteful Dave Nelson. Dangerous Dave Nelson. I'm trying to think of other radio personas that he's shared that he's used in the past. He asks, what about Superbus? Now, I did a Google search while you were talking. I could not find a thing. The only thing I found was a 1976 movie called The Big Bus.
I think Dave is just high. Maybe he's talking about Megabus? No, there's a band, Superbus.
Well, I have no idea, because again, this is the pre my time thing. But what I would say is,
I think it's from Dave in the early 70s or something, hanging out in a Volkswagen bus, eating some cool brownies, and coming up with his own concepts. Or it's any time that Fred banged Velma and Daphne in the back of the Mystery Machine.
And actually he is saying it's the big bus, but no. So like from hearing your description on Mask, it probably would have been one of those shows that I would have watched and loved as a kid, because I loved, some dumb, stupid shows. Like looking back on them now, like Big Bad Beetleborgs, I was like, yeah, I'm all for that. When and I was still at a Power Rangers, but it was more like, but these ones, because they're Beatles, it's
well, I've got to say the Fast and the Furious movies, I haven't seen The Fate of the Furious, the latest one that this gentleman directed.
Yeah.
But I sat through 7, and the ignorance of physics in that movie, it's so close to what Mask should be. And if they make a Mask movie and they aim it towards kids and not try to adult it up like, oh, here's Megan Fox showing almost boob, they actually do something that could be for the appropriate age group instead of trying to deck it out to be like for adults and make it cool. It could be a really fun movie.
Yeah.
And it could be the right move for this guy to be in charge of that. Because again, the Italian Job, way silly, way over the line silly. Don't take any of it seriously at all. But it's fun.
Yeah.
This could be fun. I'd like to see the property work out. And there's not a lot to be beholden to because, again, it's 30 years old.
For more on this Galactic Network podcast, go to gncast.com. That's GNCASTS.com.